He had it all: fame, success, a beloved role on one of the most groundbreaking shows in television history. But McLean Stevenson made a decision that shocked fans, baffled Hollywood, and changed his career forever. Why would someone at the peak of their fame walk away from a role that millions loved? Was it ambition? Was it ego? Or was there something much deeper going on behind the scenes? The story of McLean Stevenson isn't just about a man who left MASH. It's about the weight of fame, the lure of independence, and the crushing reality that sometimes chasing something bigger can lead to devastating loss. Today, we're diving deep into the rise, fall, and haunting final years of McLean Stevenson, uncovering the real reason behind his shocking departure from MASH, and why that decision followed him until his final breath. Before McLean Stevenson became the face of one of television's most beloved characters, he was just another small-town boy with big dreams and a last name that carried weight. Born Edgar McLean Stevenson Jr. on November 14, 1927, in the unassuming town of Normal, Illinois, McLean came from a family of prominence and expectation. His cousin, Adlai Stevenson II, would go on to become a two-time Democratic presidential nominee and U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. But McLean? He was drawn not to politics, but to the stage. Even in his youth, McLean had an innate sense of humor. He was the kind of kid who could diffuse any tense situation with a joke, someone who made teachers laugh when they were supposed to be scolding him. That natural charisma made people gravitate toward him, even if he didn't always fit into the mold others wanted for him. He attended Northwestern University, where he studied acting and honed his comedic timing, though even there, many expected him to eventually step into his cousin's political shoes. Instead, McLean chose unpredictability, chasing laughter in an industry full of heartbreak. He paid his dues in the early years. There were no shortcuts, no family favors, no red carpets. Stevenson bounced between odd jobs, club performances, and scriptwriting gigs. He wrote for variety shows like The Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour and That Was the Week That Was, quietly sharpening his wit behind the scenes. Despite not being the leading man yet, he had a sharp sense of humor that was unmistakable. He understood people. He knew how to read a room, and most importantly, he knew how to make others feel comfortable around him, but he wasn't satisfied behind the scenes. McLean wanted to be seen, not out of ego, but out of a desire to connect. He longed to reach people not just through jokes, but through characters who had depth, flaws, and heart. In many ways, he was waiting for a role that would allow him to merge his comedic instincts with something more meaningful. Something layered, something real. That chance finally came in the early 1970s. Television was evolving. Audiences were beginning to embrace shows that blended humor with social commentary. Norman Lear was changing the game with All in the Family, and Maude and a new breed of sitcoms was taking shape. Shows that dared to be more than just laugh tracks and punchlines. When McLean auditioned for MASH, he didn't yet realize he was stepping into a legacy. The show, based on the 1970 film of the same name, was a gamble. War was a sensitive topic in American households, and the Vietnam War had left the country deeply divided. But MASH wasn't about glorifying war. It was about survival, about absurdity, about humanity amidst horror. And McLean's easygoing, slightly befuddled persona turned out to be the perfect fit for Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake. From his very first scene, it was clear McLean had tapped into something special. He played Henry Blake not as a commanding officer, barking orders, but as a well-meaning, overwhelmed, deeply human man caught in a situation far beyond his control. He didn't need to shout to be funny. He didn't need to grandstand to be lovable. His performance was effortless, natural, and grounded in something real. Off-camera, McLean quickly bonded with his castmates. Alan Alda would later recall how Stevenson brought warmth and levity to the set, even on long shooting days. Loretta Swit described him as genuinely kind, someone who never let fame get to his head. And Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John, would often join McLean in off-screen antics that kept the mood light during even the heaviest episodes. Yet, even as he enjoyed the camaraderie and acclaim, Stevenson couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant for more. The spark that had driven him out of Illinois, that had fueled his rise from behind-the-scenes comedy writer to a primetime star, was still burning. And while MASH gave him fame, it also made him feel boxed in. What many didn't see at the time was that McLean Stevenson, the man, was very different from Henry Blake, the character. Blake was content to roll with the punches. McLean, deep down, was restless. He wanted creative freedom. He wanted to lead, to innovate, to step out of an ensemble and carry something on his own. He didn't resent his castmates, but he did resent the idea that MASH might be the peak of his career. For a man who had climbed so far, that was a terrifying thought. There was also a subtle but growing frustration with how the show was evolving. Alan Alda's Hawkeye had become the focal point of many episodes, and though Stevenson was still a major player, some behind the scenes whispered that he felt sidelined. Not overtly, not enough to cause fights or rifts, but enough to make him question whether he was truly being fulfilled as an artist. And so, just as as his star was ascending, just as audiences had fully embraced Henry Blake, McLean Stevenson began contemplating the unthinkable, walking away. At the time, he told very few people what he was considering. Most of the cast and crew were unaware that he was quietly exploring other offers, and even those close to him were shocked when he finally broke the news. It wasn't a decision made in haste. It was the product of years of ambition, doubt, and desire for something more, and it was a decision that would echo for the rest of his life. When MASH premiered in 1972, it was already a risky bet. A wartime dramedy based on a film, not the easiest pitch, but it turned out to be lightning in a bottle. Stevenson's portrayal of Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, an affable, often frazzled commanding officer, quickly became a fan favorite. He brought warmth to the chaos, a comedic calm to the madness of war. Viewers didn't just watch MASH for the laughs, they connected deeply with the characters, and Stevenson's Henry Blake was the heart of the unit. He was goofy, but sincere. He messed up, but always tried to do right by his men. That balance of humor and humanity made him unforgettable. The show's ratings soared. Cast members like Alan Alda, Loretta Swit, and Wayne Rogers became cultural icons, and Stevenson, always smiling, seemed to be on top of the world, but behind that smile, cracks were beginning to form. In 1975, after just 3 seasons, McLean Stevenson announced he was leaving MASH. The entertainment world was stunned. Fans were devastated. Why would someone walk away from such a massive hit, especially when his character was so beloved? At the time, Stevenson told reporters that he wanted more creative freedom and a chance to be a leading man on his own terms. He famously said, "I want to get out of the show business's safety net. I'd rather try and fail than never try at all." It sounded noble, bold even, but there was a deeper tension simmering under the surface. Some insiders claimed Stevenson was frustrated with being overshadowed by Alan Alda, whose character, Hawkeye, had become the focal point of the series. Others said he felt boxed in, limited by the ensemble format, and desperate to break out as a solo star. Producers tried to convince him to stay. Castmates were reportedly heartbroken, but Stevenson had made up his mind. He walked away, and unknowingly walked straight into a storm. When McLean Stevenson left MASH, the show didn't just quietly write him out. Instead, the writers made a bold, unthinkable move. In the season 3 finale titled Abyssinia Henry, Henry Blake receives his discharge and says his heartfelt goodbyes. Audiences breathed a sigh of relief until the final scene. Radar enters the operating room, visibly shaken, and delivers the gut-wrenching news. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan. It spun in. There were no survivors. It was one of the most shocking moments in television history. The audience had no warning. Even some cast members weren't told about the scene until the cameras rolled. That raw emotion, totally real. Fans were furious. Letters poured in. Some called it brilliant, others called it cruel, but everyone remembered it. And for McLean Stevenson, it became a moment that would define and haunt his entire career. After MASH, Stevenson believed he was destined for bigger things. He quickly landed his own show, The McLean Stevenson Show. The network had high hopes, but the show flopped. Critics panned it. Viewers didn't connect. Undeterred, Stevenson tried again with In the Beginning, then Hello Larry. Both were commercial failures. Hello Larry, in particular, became a punchline. Despite NBC's efforts to connect it to the popular show Different Strokes, the show never caught on. Each new failure chipped away at Stevenson's image. Once a beloved TV figure, he was now associated with short-lived, ill-fated projects. He even poked fun at himself on talk shows, acknowledging that leaving MASH might have been a mistake. In an interview, he once said, "I made the dumbest mistake of my life when I left MASH." It was a rare moment of raw honesty, one that revealed just how deeply that decision continued to affect him. While McLean Stevenson maintained a public image of humor and humility, those close to him claimed he was quietly tormented by regret. Hollywood insiders whispered about the toll his post-MASH failures took on his mental health, though he never publicly admitted to depression. Friends noted his mood changed over the years. The once charismatic jokester grew more introspective, even melancholic. He was often asked in interviews about Henry Blake's death, and though he'd laugh it off, the pain in his eyes told another story. It didn't help that MASH continued to soar without him. The show reached even greater heights, winning Emmys and earning a record-breaking series finale. Stevenson, meanwhile, watched from the sidelines as his former co-stars continued to thrive. Some speculated that Stevenson felt typecast and trapped by the legacy of Henry Blake. No matter what new role he took, fans always compared it to MASH, and it never measured up. By the early 1990s, McLean Stevenson had largely disappeared from the spotlight. He took on occasional guest roles, appeared in commercials, and made lighthearted appearances on late-night shows. But the fame he once had was long gone. In February 1996, McLean Stevenson suffered a fatal heart attack at the age of 68. He died quietly, without much fanfare. Strangely, just a day later, Roger Bowen, the actor who played Henry Blake in the original MASH film, also passed away from a heart attack. The eerie timing stunned fans. News of Stevenson's death triggered a wave of nostalgia and sadness. Fans remembered him, not for his missteps, but for the warmth and humor he brought to their screens. His death was a sobering reminder of how quickly fame can fade, and how deeply one decision can change the course of a life. Today, McLean Stevenson is remembered with both affection and sadness. His portrayal of Henry Blake remains iconic, warm, funny, deeply human. But his story has become a cautionary tale in Hollywood circles. For actors tempted to leave a hit show in search of solo glory, Stevenson's name often comes up. The phrase, "pulling a McLean Stevenson," even entered industry slang for leaving too soon. But that legacy, though a bit tragic, is also deeply human. He dared to take a chance, even if it cost him everything. And though his career faltered, his work still resonates. Fans still rewatch MASH, still laugh at Henry Blake's antics, and still mourn his tragic departure, both on-screen and off. And some wonder, was there a MASH curse? After all, Wayne Rogers, who also left the show early, struggled for years to regain his footing. Others who departed before the finale never quite reached the same level of acclaim again. Was it bad timing, miscalculation, or something bigger? For McLean Stevenson, we may never know what haunted him most, the fame he lost or the legacy he left behind. McLean Stevenson walked away from greatness and paid a steep price, but in doing so, he left behind one of the most unforgettable exits in television history. He taught us that behind every smile in Hollywood, there may be regret. Behind every bold move, a gamble that doesn't pay off. But even through failure, Stevenson gave us something enduring, a character who lives on, a story that still stings, and a lesson we won't forget. And maybe that, more than fame, is what it means to leave a legacy.